Hi guys, so this video is on shaping. Shaping is one of the principles that we use to teach new skills, often utilized with teaching language approximations and building on those approximations, but it's also utilized for teaching other skills too. And it really ties together with our differential reinforcement principle, which was talked about in another training. So I highly encourage you guys to listen to that training as well in conjunction with this one, because I feel like with the two of these, it will help kind of bridge the gap. But what shaping is it's a process of teaching new skills by breaking up into smaller parts. And we reinforce each part until we meet the desired goal. We call it the terminal goal, which is basically that we're achieving the end result. So this probably to you, if you've done the chaining training already, it's probably sounding similar to you. And it is similar in that we're using both of these skills to break down a skill into smaller parts. The biggest difference is the type of skills that we're using for these. So chaining is utilized for more complex skills with several individual behaviors. So we talk about like brushing teeth, for example, turning on the water, putting toothpaste on, brushing. Those are all very completely different behaviors. Whereas shaping, we are looking at one behavior and breaking down that one behavior into smaller parts. So in order to teach that, we do so using differential reinforcement. So we basically look at what is the current desired skill, and we work on providing reinforcement for that target skill, and then we use extinction procedures for the previously mastered skills or previous skills that were taught. So an example of this is, I talked about common ways to use shaping is through teaching approximations. So an example is maybe we want to teach our child to say mama, but they're not quite there yet in terms of the vocalizations that they currently have. So we want to break it down. So our terminal goal or our end goal here is for the child to say mama. So step one might be to just have them say because they have that sound already. So in that scenario, we're just reinforcing the sound. So in our contingency world with our antecedent behavior and consequence, we would have no bubbles, child says child has bubbles. And then the response that we're extinguishing is either no chip, child says buh, and then they're not receiving access to bubbles. That's a bad example because we would probably give them bubbles for buh. So maybe they say tuh, which is not a sound that we're looking for. Then we wouldn't provide access to reinforcement for that. So now the child is consistently saying so now next step is for them to say ma, which is a closer approximation to mama. So then we would say no chip, child says ma, and then they get the chip. So we would directly be reinforcing the better response. And then we would put an extinction procedure in for the sound, and only honor the better response that the child's capable of. And then once we're consistent with that, then we'll go to now next step is for them to say mama. So the child doesn't have the chip, they say mama, and then they get the chip. And then our extinction contingency is that they don't have the chip, they say tuh or they say or they say ma, which is all things that we're now trying to extinguish because they now have the better response of mama, and that's what we want to reinforce. So that's an example of a shaping procedure that we commonly use when we're working on increasing our utterance length and our just our approximations in general. So again, in the differential reinforcement one, we talked a little bit about response dimensions too, and how we can use differential reinforcement. Those were all examples of shaping procedures. So just to kind of reiterate the different dimensions and some examples of what shaping would look like for that. So one is a response topography. So that is exactly how the child's emitting the response. So in the differential reinforcement one, we use the example of waving. So, we're teaching waving and your child's waving like this, but we want it to be like this. So this is all one response that we're trying to shape. So maybe step one is we're reinforcing this. And then once they're successful, maybe now they're doing this. Which is like a halfway point. And then now step 3 is now they're waving fully like this, which is our end goal. And we kind of work our way up to that to set the child up for success. Another example is frequency. So it's how often or how many responses your child engages in. So this can kind of go hand in hand with duration, which we talked about in the differential reinforcement one and using the example of clapping. So we might teach your child, clap your hands, and they're doing this. Maybe what we want to do is increase the frequency to clap your hands, and they do it 3 times. So we might teach like, okay, this is step 1. Step 2 is now they do it twice. And step 3 is now they do it 3 times. So that's an example of shaping the frequency of the response that they're engaging in. Another example of that, like I said, is duration. So instead of looking at how many times they clap, maybe we're looking at how long they're clapping for. So maybe they start with, 1 second, and we're working our way up to 5 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So maybe we do 1 second as step 1, 3 seconds is step 2, and 5 seconds is step 3. And we work on reinforcing each of those. So just again, being mindful that, our end goal is 5 seconds. So when we're trying to teach 5 seconds, we no longer provide reinforcement for 1 second or 3 seconds because we're trying to only reinforce the better responses. And then we also talked about magnitude in the differential reinforcement training. So just looking at, if we're teaching a child to ask for chips, they might be saying chip, and we can't really hear them. So we want them to say it louder and say like chip. But they're not quite there yet. So we might break it down a little bit and first start by honoring chip and then work up to like chip. So it's a little louder, and then now it's like chip. So it's loud, and now everybody can hear them. So those might be our steps to work on increasing the magnitude. And then now we're no longer honoring the whispering of the term. That's kind of the gist of what shaping is and what some scenarios are that we would teach it. And like I said, the difference between shaping and chaining, you can see in those examples that were provided, is the end goal is one skill. So when we're teaching a child to, progressively say mama, saying mama is one word. Whereas if we were to teach them to say, mama, can I have a drink? That's more so, I guess, like a chaining procedure because there's several words that are embedded into there and we have to build on each one as we go. So the purpose of shaping is to kind of take down those skills, and our hopes is that we can, just go right to teaching mama. But that's unfortunately not the case all the time. So it kind of is just a tool to allow us to break down each individual skill a little bit further, to where we're teaching a child to, know what the expectations are, set them up for success, and reduce frustration as much as possible. In terms of, teaching shaping too, I just wanted to point out that making sure that you know what your end goal is, and you're breaking down your goals into things that are achievable for the child and already in their repertoire a little bit. So in the example of saying mama, and we started with the sound, the was assumed that it's already kind of in their repertoire. If it's not, step one is to teach that skill first. And then you can kind of build on it. Same goes for like clapping your hands. If, your child doesn't have that skill at all in their repertoire, I would first start by like providing prompting and guidance to get them there before, moving on to anything additional. And that's it for shaping. That's the gist of how we use it in teaching. Like I said, I would really strongly recommend also looking at the differential reinforcement one, because these two go hand in hand a lot. All right, thank you guys.